Hello everyone, and this is going to be video 2 of this week's series. And what we're going to be doing today is we are going to be basically taking elements from Illustrator and importing them into Maya. Now, for this, your best bet is to have the following ready. Now, you're probably going to want to make sure that you have an area specifically for your layers up so you can see what you're doing. You're definitely going to need your Pathfinder. It's been a while since you probably have had to use this, so if you're not sure how to bring the Pathfinder up, this is what you do. You go to Window and just go down your list here until you find Pathfinder. This is going to be useful if you have elements that might have some compound elements to them, so that's why it's good to have these areas here. And you're also going to potentially need your text, but of course you could just use regular text for this. I'll leave that up to you. So what I'm going to do here just to get started is I'm going to create myself 3 different shapes. Now they're going to be separate from each other. There is a reason why I'm doing this way. So basically I have my square. I have this little thingamabob over here. And let's see here. Yeah, I was originally going to make a heart. And, oh, this actually works out pretty nicely. Cool. And I'm going to create myself a star. Now, it's just some random shapes that we have here. I'm going to be honest, color doesn't matter. In this case, they could be pretty much any color that you want. That being said, I do want to kind of see what I'm doing, so I'm going to flip these around. And that's going to be for all of them, by the way. Flip. And you don't even really need the color inside, as I was saying before. Just be able to see what you're doing. But once that's done, you're going to be exporting this. Now, I'm going to do this a couple times so that you have an idea of basically how this works, because I don't want to show this all in one thing. After all, practice makes perfect, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky. When you save it, you have to save it in a very specific way. For some reason, Maya isn't a big fan of newer versions of your file, so you have to actually export it in a different way. The good news is, if you know how to approach it, it's pretty simple. So you're going to go to File, you're going to go to Save As. This part's normal, and I'm going to save this as Example 1. I'm putting this on my desktop so I can find it easily. So I'm going to hit Save. Now, this is the part that's the most important. Whether you're using Illustrator 2019 or 2020, either way, you're going to have to go to the drop-down that's over here, and you're going to have to backwards save this to version 8. Now, once again, not sure why that has to be this particular way. Maya happens to like these versions, so this is the way this can import in. If you go even version 9, there's a high chance that what you are importing will not work. So you have to be a little careful with this. So, yep, version 8. Going to hit OK. It's telling you that you're saving in an older version. That's totally fine. You hit OK. Bam. So that's basically how you get started. And again, I'm going to show this multiple times. Okay. So to import these in, you're going to go to Create. You're going to go to Adobe Illustrator Object. Now for this, I'd highly recommend hitting your settings box. And this is the reason why. Because there's 2 ways you can import. One version, you can import just the curves themselves, or alternatively, you can import these in as shapes. Technically, they're called bezels, but it's basically the shapes ahead of time. So I'm going to go to curves first so you can actually see how it's done. So I hit Apply, and I'm going to once again go to my desktop, and I'm going to choose the example to get started. And there they are. So all the shapes that I made previously, it's going to be putting in here. Bit of a heads up. They are put in as a group. As you can see over here, I still have my outliner turned on. If you don't see this, once again, go to Window and go to Outliner, and you should be able to see it. So this is how the group looks. Of course, you can select the individual shapes themselves, so that's helpful. But anyways, I'm going to move this over so we can get to our next shape. Now, this is going to be useful if you have a game plan for this. So, for example, if you just want to make these flat elements, I can easily go to my surface, I can go to my planar, and I could just do it like that. That's if this is the route that you want to go. However, if you do want to get a little bit more complicated, there are methods for that. Let's actually take a look at those. So, if I go to bevel, and again, what we have here is basic options for how wide the actual bevel is going to be. I probably would actually change this to 0, but we'll take a look at some of this stuff. We're going to take a look at the bevel depth, how far the bevel goes. You might actually want to turn 0 on both of these, depends on your choice. And the extrude distance, this is basically how far this is going to be extruded. This could be helpful, by the way. And it also has options for caps, if you want to put these on or not. Basically, it means at the end of these, will they be filled in? Kind of like what I just did with the planer over here. Hence the reason why I showed it. And of course, there's different bevel styles you can go with. At least for now, just try the standard to see if that works for you. So I'm going to hit apply. And going to go to, once again, example. And here's how they look. So if you just need to make a shape very quickly, this actually might be your best bet. Nice thing about these two is, if necessary, first of all, they're all connected, by the way. Unlike the previous one where they were all disconnected, these are all connected from the get-go. So if I go to bevel plus, if I need to change anything, I can still do that. So if I'm not satisfied with the width, I can turn that down and turn it to a negative. Although I'm not sure if I'd recommend this at all. But I could put this down, or if I want to change the depth, that basically means how far this is going to go out. You can basically, and again, this is specifically the bevel in this case. So if I change these both to 0, the amount that's extruded is going to be, or beveled I should say, is going to be minimal to none. And then if I go to the extrude depth, I can bring this out to be as thick or as thin, literally, as necessary. So it's nice to have these options in case you want to make a very specific shape for yourself. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to show this right now. Now, this is basically how these particular parts work. So let's see here. I'm just going to take that. Take this. Oh, just making sure I'm getting all my stuff. I'm just going to put these all temporarily on its own layer so I can hide them. Now, when we go into this, by the way, I mean, again, this is some simple objects for us. And I would definitely say I wouldn't get too complex with the shapes that you're putting in there as well. I mean, granted, the software can take a relative beating, so to speak. But it's not, if you're trying to get too complicated, it can cause more problems than be helpful for. So for example, if I wanted to import like a beach ball or something like that. So I'm going to make myself a very quick little beach ball with a star in the middle. Probably didn't need to get rid of my star, but that's okay. And then I'm going to make myself a star in here. Nice. Now, if I wanted to import these inside of Maya, well, there's two ways that this could be approached. The first method that this could be approached potentially is if we save this, obviously, just basically kind of save this as is. So this is going to be example 2. And again, do not forget to change that to Illustrator 8. That part's important, or it's not going to come in properly. But what I can do here, that's actually kind of neat, is if I was to import these in by going to, once again, Create, and the Adobe Illustrator, I'm going to be choosing curves this time. There'll be a reason why that I'm going to show momentarily. But this is the reason why I brought it this way. Now that I have these two shapes in here, I could, if I wanted to, basically use the, let's see here. I can use the planer to get started with this. making sure that I'm going with polygons. And again, if you remember the general fit, I think this should actually do a pretty good job with this. Yeah, the topology is going to look horrid. I'm not going to lie to you there. But still, the nice thing about this is I can extrude this out like this. Then I can go to this shape, and I could do a planar for this as well. Extrude that back. Again, it looks pretty terrible, I have to admit, topology-wise, but the moment I deselect, it actually shouldn't look that bad. The nice thing about this is because I brought these in as different shapes, once again, I have total control on how this is made. So that does tend to be pretty helpful for me. I might want to put this to quads though, so I'm going to actually take a look at what this would look like in quads. I'm not super satisfied with what I saw before. So if I put this in quads instead, it looks a little bit okay. I'm going to do this one more time, but let's see if I put this to 10 by 10. I think that the poly count is going to be a little higher. Yeah, that works just fine. And I'm just going to extrude that out. Yeah, basically I can make this bigger like so. Yeah, I'm just kind of liking this one a little bit better. But anyways, this is the kind of shapes I'm talking about when you're basically making this yourself. So again, if you weren't 100% satisfied with what you were making before, with the basic curves, again, going to create and going to the curve tool over here. And I don't blame you either, because I mean, Illustrator just has so many awesome tools when editing and working with vectors and curves. That, again, if you have an opportunity to work with something like this, I definitely would take it myself. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to show this to everyone at this time. But this is one method that works pretty well. One thing you might want to watch out for, though, is... Gonna delete the history over here. Let's see, delete by type history, just so I can move all of them at the same rate. There we go. Okay, so one area that might be a little tricky though is if you're trying to do the same thing. Once again, going to create, going to settings here. And if you try to bevel this in, this is why I brought these in as different curves, because if I try and bevel this in as is, take a look at what happens. So it still works okay, but there's might be some weird elements that go on with this. So in other words, it ends up being a little bit more tricky to control. So that's one of the reasons why I'm not exactly a big fan of bringing this in all the time in just one way. Again, just basically bringing these in as separate curves ended up giving me more control in the long run, which is definitely a good thing. So that's why I wanted to show you this method. Oh boy, that is not looking too pretty though. But here's a question. What if you wanted to bring this in, but you wanted the star to actually, or anything else that could be imported in, or any other kind of hole that could be inside the mesh in that particular way? So let's actually take a look at how we can make that happen. Okay, so if I wanted to make something with a hole, I actually kind of like this, so I'm going to actually keep this for now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make myself a rectangle like this. And then I'm going to create myself an ellipse. Command C, and then I'm going to go to edit, paste in place, or for the PC users, it's going to be Shift Control V. The reason why I'm doing it this way is it just ends up being way easier to move this out. There we are. Cool. Now, the goal that I want for this is I want to bring this in, but I want these three holes to basically add a little bit of a cut in between here. In other words, this is going to be a bit of an object that's going to have holes inside of it. Now, the first thing that I find that works really well if you want to make something that's going to have holes in it is, and by the way, I'm going to change the color of this so you can see this a little easier. So I'm going to make this something simple to see. Well, I think a yellow should be fine. In the end of the day, it's not going to matter what the colors are. So, but it does matter about the order. Yep, that's way better. Okay, so I would say before getting started with this, it would be a wise decision to basically select all three of your circles here, go into Object, and group them. Now what this is going to do is it's basically going to make all three of those objects one, like so. Now the reason why we have to do it this way is sometimes using the Pathfinder, at least the method we're going to be using, which is going to be the minus front, it doesn't really take too kindly to multiple cuts in these cases. So if you basically take the amount of objects you're going to have combined together, in this case all three of these circles, you're going to find that grouping them together and then selecting both elements at the same time, I could use the minus front to make myself some holes. So not only does that help out here, but it's also going to help out when we put this in Maya. So check this out. If you go to, once again, I'm going to save this as example 3, because I'm going to be honest, I'm not very imaginative today with names, but that's all right. Remember, you have to make sure it's Illustrator 8 every time. When I was getting prepped up for today's lecture, I must have made this mistake every single time I saved. So this is the reason why I'm making sure that I don't do that again. And I'm hitting OK. Alrighty then. So I'm going to go to Maya. And once again, I'm going to go to the curves here. And I'm going to go bevel this time because I can. And I'm going to just use the create. Well, actually, I'm going to hit apply in this case, because there's still one more thing I want to import in. I'm bringing in my example. Oh, one other important little safety tip that I've neglected to mention. Make sure that whatever you're exporting is the only thing in there. Now, this is a happy little accident, so I suppose it's not a complete waste. But yeah, this is what happens if you have anything hidden on your layers. So, just going to go in here. And even though it's hidden, as you saw, it still got exported. So, yikes. So, I'm just going to get rid of that for now. Now it should be able to export just fine. So, again, File, Save As, Example 3. Yes, I want to replace it. Illustrator 8. And now, when I import it properly this time, there we are. So our object has some nice looking holes in it, and it's relatively easy to work with. Again, if there's anything that needs to be adjusted or changed, you can always go to your Bevel Plus and play around with some of the extrusion elements here. And again, it does a relatively nice job of bringing this in. The only issue that comes in, however, is the fact that you have a whole bunch of nasty looking geometry in these cases, but more likely than not, you're going to not mess with this too much anyways, so there shouldn't be any problems with this. Emphasis on the word should. Okay, so last thing I'd like to show, and I'm going to delete this ahead of time so I don't make the same mistake again, is, well, that's all fine and dandy, but what if you want to actually import something, a logo that might have some text on it? So for example, let's see, just going to make myself a rectangle over here. And I make myself a very strange little logo of sorts. Once again, Command C, Command Shift V to paste in place. Okay, And again, the color's not going to matter because when we import it in, it's going to be gone. So the last part that I want to do is I want to add a little bit of text in here. And of course, adding text is not a problem. And I'll keep this as lorem ipsum. That'll be fine. However, if you want to add in text, say for example, again, you wanted to add and change some stuff, or maybe you have a client that has a logo in here already and it's in Illustrator, it's already set to go. One thing you have to watch out for is the type of text that we have here is not compatible with Maya. Now, I'll show you what I mean. If I was to go to the lorem ipsum, and again, I'm just going to save this as example 4 in this case. Now, if I try to import the text the way that it is, the text will not show up. So in short, I'm fire marshal billing this. Oop, that is an undo. So yeah, if I try and bring an example 4 the way that I've done it, it'll bring in the shapes without a problem. But yeah, anything else in here, not going to be coming in. So yeah, so to actually make the text, the text we have over here, readable, we need to do one thing. Oh, I'm going to actually get rid of this. Oop, no, I'm not. Yeah, so to make this text readable in Maya, this is what you need to do. You need to go to Type, and you need to go to an option called Create Outlines. Now, if you remember this from a couple of semesters ago, you'll remember that this will make it so that we can manipulate the text after the fact. So in other words, instead of just being a text vector element, this is actually shapes that we can adjust and change. And now that that's done, so are we. Because now, if I was to export this again, well, export as in save. Yes, I want to save it here. Yes, I want to make sure it's Illustrator 8 and hit OK. Then I can go to my file over here. Once again, go to Create, Adobe Illustrator Object. And yeah, again, I'd like to hit Apply myself. Then go to example 4, because that's basically what I've saved this as. Takes a moment, but there we go. So our text comes in, looks relatively good. Heck, I could probably just keep it like this. I'm pretty happy with it. However, if you're not, which is understandable, you can go to your Bevel Plus, and I'm just going to turn off both the bevels, because I can always extrude the depth if I want to. That's looking pretty interesting. But again, this is the kind of freedom that you have if you have more knowledge of your tools and basically can make anything that you eventually want. Oh, one last thing I just want to mention before I forget. You might want to delete your history. If you want to do more stuff with this, as I said before, it's not a bad idea to potentially delete your history because again, unless you have a game plan with it, if you delete by type history, now I can actually select all the faces down here. I'm not going to select this one's up here though. And I could separate it. So now this is its own object, these are their own objects, and this is its own object. But at the same time, it's its own object together. So if you remember some of the stuff I showed previously, whether it's the previous class or some of the stuff I've shown today, you got some stuff you can play around with this. So that's pretty much the long and short of what I wanted to show in terms of importing with Illustrator. So hopefully you found this useful. The last part that I want to do today is I want to talk a little bit about the Adobe character generator. Now the reason why we're going to look at this is we are going to eventually be working with pre-made characters for animation. And at the very least, I want to make sure I give everyone a bit of a taste on how to actually animate their characters, or how to animate characters, period. Ideally, if you're able to use this Autodesk character generator, and I'll leave the link in the description for that time, you can, again, make any kind of character you want. But I digress. So thank you for watching my video. We'll be taking a look at the third and final video for this week very shortly.